a couple minutes.
A little extra time.
And we're live. Yes, we made it.
Yes.
Hi. Okay. So, as usual, I just want to say hello to everybody who's listening to the show. Welcome. No, welcome back for another episode of Self Care is My Job. I'm Samantha Long. I am a yoga instructor and a self care mentor for moms. And self care is my job, which is why, hence the name of the show. It should be everybody's up there in everybody's priority list.
Yes.
So I'm going to allow my guests in. As usual, I always have these amazing people that I get to connect with online and have a discussion. So hi, how are you? And
Hi,
let us know a
Samantha.
little bit about you.
Yeah, so it's so nice to be here. My name is Fi Simler. I am a trauma mindful business coach, and I come from a few different worlds. I originally studied fine arts. Actually, I have a fine arts background, and that's what I studied in school. Taught at a Title I public charter for a while, so got some experience. It's funny how these skills build upon each other, because now I'm a business coach, but if you can delegate to a room full of middle schoolers, you can delegate to a room full of adults. And then I kind of moved on, worked in the nonprofit world a little bit. And then, eventually that took me into the formal marketing firm world and design world. So, my last job was as a senior project manager at a firm. And it was around that time that I started to really internalize that hustle culture and that go, go, go culture. And my body started to break down. So now, long story long, I started with my joints hurting, and then it sort of worked its way up my arm and then down my spinal column to the point where I would wake up and I could not feel or move my body from the neck down, which was really terrifying. And, I eventually I kept going though. Kept going for months.
Sure.
I would kind of shake it off and eventually feel okay to go down the stairs. And my husband would take me out to my car, put on my seatbelt, and I would just sort of go like this. And well, for the listeners, I would just sort of put my palms on the steering wheel and just commute to work. I'd commute 20 miles to work, and then I'd come back. But eventually it got to the point where my body hit a wall, it broke. And I took a leave of absence. And this was a job that I know could I was in this really good position. I got a promotion really fast. I got a 20% raise. I had, people under me, and I was in this managerial role. And I knew that I was wow, I could really take this job and the possibilities are endless. I was I'm going to get that corner office. I am going to make the six figures. This is the first step of that. And that did not play out the way that I had originally intended. So I felt like a failure. I really did. I felt like I let myself down and I wasn't good enough. And so, during my leave of absence, I got surgery on my arm to fix my nerve damage. And I started to really take on self-care like a job. I would literally wake up and I was what can I do this week to help myself heal? And I would do a lot of breath work and, stuff that's physical and also on that deeper level of regulating your nervous system. And I knew that I had to slowly build upon each other. Got good doctors that I trusted and all of that. So 2 years later, this was 2019. So 3 years later, I now own a business, work from home, and integrate self-care throughout my day. And my whole philosophy for my business is to tell people it's time to give the middle finger to manipulative business practices, hustle culture that dysregulates you, and to instead put your humanity at the center of your business, because you cannot abandon your like human self and its capacity and limitations and baggage and all of that when you go into business. Like, it is impossible. You're still a human at the end of the day, whether or not you walk into an office or come to your home office. So I really have faith that my clients can build businesses from a space of joy, embodiment, and honoring themselves. So that's basically, it's like the opposite of what I came from. And it was just an unlearning of all of that toxicity that I had taken on. And I feel better than ever, to be honest, physically.
Yes. Good for you, first of all. And congratulations on the entire story. Not just the fact that, you have your own business now and that you feel better than ever, right? The whole thing, soup to nuts, because that's a part of your process.
Yeah.
Just like we all have these struggles, challenges that are a part of our story, a part of our process, that are kind of necessary to work through in order for things to come up in the process so that we can become aware of what we actually need to work on, and or the type of self-care that's actually needed to get us to the next level or to actually have us living the life that we truly want.
Yeah.
So thank you for telling us all of that. For anybody who's watching, by the way, yes, I have changed my location. I'm taking up space in my house.
Yes.
I've decided to do this on the floor of my dining room today. Because
Like,
normally I'm like in the basement with like I'm sure what most people think is like, this gorgeous like basement studio, which is bullshit, because it's just like my one little corner in the basement, right near the laundry, like.
I'm
But
like
I'm
the AC
changing
unit.
location today. I'm taking up space. So thank you again for sharing with us all of that. I'm just going to relate with you for a moment in that I also have a background in the corporate world, and I was in publishing. I've told this story quite a few times, I'm sure, on this show already, but was in publishing, working in Manhattan here for about 10 years prior to having my children and leaving that space. And yeah, I mean, sure, I completely embodied on a level that was very real the hustle culture, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, I think that the catalyst to me knowing that there was a need for self-care for me, that there was a need for change when I left that arena and decided to become a stay-at-home mom, right? I knew that something wasn't right, because I had embodied that hustle culture so much that I felt, even having stepped into the role of mother, which ideally would be, should, right, feel like the most important job in the world. But I felt pretty much worthless, because the fruits of my labor are, as a mother, they're not tangible, right? You're not looking at dollar signs going up. You're not looking at the product at the end of, your efforts. You are ideally not, treating your child like a job, although there were literally periods where I would do just that, not treat the child like a job, but treat motherhood like a full-time job, or like a corporate job, where I was like, trying to make things just so. You don't even have that much control, really. So you got to let that go. But, yes, something was very, very off from the get. And the reason partly was because I had succumbed so much to that culture that it felt like stripping away, my title and my salary and the endless list of meetings of the day and the, 250 emails per day that would validate me and my worthiness in some ways for a very, very long time. Those were all gone in a blink. So even though, again, I'm a mother now, this is the most important job in the world, so on and so forth. But nope, didn't feel that way at all.
Yeah.
Right. So you fill your basket with all of that, and you fill your cup with all of these things that are kind of validating you. But what do you have to show for it if it all goes away? And but yeah, we can talk for a moment about like that hustle culture, right? One of the of course, I'm not going to remember who wrote this. It might have been anonymous, but I love one of the one of the things that I remember reading lately that I loved was about like sort of cancel. I hate that word canceling, but essentially like getting rid of the hustle culture and making it more about aligning. So kind of bringing that in as a method of trying to build whatever business or lifestyle that you want, like what aligns with you, what feels really, really good in your body, as opposed to striving, like the striving culture, the trying to control, the the constant grabbing for the next thing and more and more and more, which is kind of what we're taught,
Yeah, of
right?
course. Yeah, I mean, what you said resonates so hard because when you have a shift like that, like I've heard from lots of mothers and women and, from all walks of life and all ages, but I think if there's ever a big shift, either stopping working or getting laid off or moving or anything, like I've heard many stories, your like identity sort of gets stripped away because you like bank your identity on like what you do in your job, and it becomes like, this is who I am, and it's because that like gives you like that validation. And I'm reading a couple books. One of them was nonviolent communication, and he said something about like no one can really validate you. You have to validate yourself. And you know when you are in a conflict or in a relationship with someone where you know that what you're saying validates them,
Mm,
just like be aware of that, because at the end of the day, they have to do the work and it's not really your job to do it for them.
mm,
I think us as women take on a lot of like the work and the emotional labor that other people have to do for themselves, but we're taught to do it for them or to do the work for them or to try to fix them, like a lot of us. And we can get only a little far and try to support and hold space, but really like they have to do it. Like there's no way I can transform or like heal someone. Like they heal themselves, they validate themselves, and I can try to set up this trauma mindful space and use consent and try to the best of my ability to do it. But I can't want it more than you. And that was a lesson I think I had to learn as a coach or anybody who does service. Like, I can't want it more than them. And I hate that because I'm a low key control freak and I'm unlearning this stuff all the time working with other people because, everyone's so vastly different and their life story is so different.
yeah. I mean, I think the majority of us are trying to unlearn the controlling, right?
Yeah.
And that's literally what hustle culture has done to us is it's programming that makes us believe that unless we bust our ass to a level where you wake up and you're in pain or you can't feel your feet or whatever it is, right? I mean, for me, like my biggest story around that is, of course, how I came to yoga, because I had such unbelievable shoulder and neck pain and shoulder blade issues and all of this from being at a computer or on a plane all the time. So I had a happy ending to that because I was able to see that I needed after, when I couldn't see that I needed 5 martinis after work, when that wasn't the answer, it was yoga. And sometimes it was yoga and then 5 martinis,
Yeah.
but way back when.
Yeah.
But it was so there's a happy ending to me seeing that I needed to do something about what my work was, the symptoms that were showing up based on how hard I was working. And of course, now in retrospect, having learned what I've learned, it wasn't just about sitting at a desk all day. The tension in my body was literal anxiety taking on like a physical manifestation inside
Yeah.
of me and having an effect on me in the body, which of
Yeah.
course now, of course, I know all of this now. I had no clue that any of this existed back then. But
Totally. Bodies are always trying to protect us.
yeah, the body keeps score, as the amazing book tells us. And
Yeah.
it's really about so going back to that culture, right? Like, not only does it teach us that we have to bust our ass and that it will be a struggle, it will hurt, right? Like how many of, I mean, I talk about this all the time, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but like growing up, I actually learned from my family always like talking about their struggles as if their struggles being more than someone else's makes them a better person, or adds
Mm,
to their value because their life was harder. So it's like you're
doing it.
actually telling me, you're modeling from me that the world is going to reward me the harder that my life is in some way, shape, or form, that I have busted my ass hard enough to be able
I
to
deserve
be
this.
worthy of that salary or that title or whatever, so that working harder and it being harder for you is actually what's going to create the success, or that it even is success in some way,
Right.
which is very scary.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
There's like, the harder you work, the more successful you'll be. That's not necessarily true. Some
No.
people, I know people who work like 3 days a week and they have six-figure businesses. They have five figures coming in every month because they've done the work on the front end and they've, done all of these things. And that doesn't mean that like you or I could do the exact same things they do and have the exact same results, and that's why I like working one-on-one with someone, because it's so different. So it's nuanced, and to say like the harder I work and it has to be hard and I have to be grasping and I have to bust ass and like, be a machine. And that's what's going to get me to that success is like, it's a one-dimensional thing. And we have to just really be like, is this true? When I get into like a tizzy in my brain, I ask myself two things. I say, is this true? And I say, do I want to give this attention? And it's just asking and getting curious without judgment, which is something I've learned from doing so much damn yoga
Mm,
over
mhm.
like since middle school. And it's, and sometimes I'm like, maybe it isn't true. Huh. Okay. That's interesting. Like, that's interesting. Where did I learn that from? And I think I wrote like on social media yesterday, like I started during this journey to ask myself, like, when and why did I learn that I need to break my body to work?
Mm,
When did I learn that I needed to break my body to be successful?
mhm.
How did I learn that? Who taught me that? Um, and I think it was like, yeah, it was just this culture and like, the desire to, because we are taught also that like people who have more money are like on a higher moral ground sometimes, like
Mhm.
will worship celebrities and rich people. And there's just so much like glamour about it. And we see all the time that no matter what they have in the bank, people can be really troubled or, and people who are not of those kinds of means can have tremendous joy. So, I mean, people are complex and it's not a one
Mhm.
answer thing. It would be nice if it was.
Oh,
But
yeah, of course. It would be nice. I mean, it's just like I say all the time to clients who are trying to prioritize their self-care. That's a struggle in itself, is to be able to even prioritize yourself over the needs of everyone else, or over the needs of your supervisor or your career or your job or anything like that. Um, and we wish that it could just be this little switch, but it's really not that simple. And but it kind of leads us to a little bit deeper into the conversation we want to get into, of just like what comes up when you decide to make a change, right? So whether that means leaving a career, or a career change, or leaving, you know um your company that you're currently at to potentially start your own business, or whether it is having kids, or like anything. When there's a major life transition such as that, that's when all the shit comes up. That's when all the mirrors come up. Take a look at this, take a look at this. And like, I'll give an example, since we were talking also about like storytelling, right? And like having that be like the way that we get to connect with each other without saying like, I'm going to sell you on this, I'm going to sell you on that. Like,
yeah,
my whole thing is to share my journey. And my journey is not, again, like we said, unfortunately, it is not like I'm just going to do this self-care practice and it's going to turn off all those negative thoughts in my head just like that. It isn't. It's an ongoing, just like yoga is an ongoing cumulative practice where the overall goal is to prioritize myself and nurture myself in a way that puts me first on an energetic level
Yeah.
so that I can feel powerful, so that I could feel confident, so that I actually am changing my own frequency on a much larger level, and that I can get what aligns with me that way, so that I can actually be ready even for when opportunities come up, but also send a message out that says I actually am worthy of whatever aligns with me. I can attract that and I can accept that into my life. I can receive. Or at least that's how I take it, right? And even for me, and I've been in business for a few years now, I'm still pretty early on in this process, considering how complex it is.
Yeah.
But I've been very vocal about how loud my inner critic is these days. And this is, like I said, a couple of years into business. And I think that most people would assume, right, that I've been doing this for a couple years. I have some private clients. I'm running some online offerings. I teach tons of yoga classes per week. I get in front of people all the time and teach. Like I think that a lot of people would assume that that must mean that my confidence level must be out the roof.
Yeah.
And I can't possibly have anything in my head going on saying you're bullshit.
Yeah.
You're a fraud, you're bullshit, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't qualify, you need more training. What do you
You
really
don't
know?
know
No one
enough.
wants to hear you, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, yeah.
So this is an example, my own vulnerable share of an example of what goes on. And I've come back to the basics as far as, what self-care in my toolbox that I'm going to use to combat that, right? That's working ish for me nowadays, is coming back to the basics of like gratitude and affirmations. And
Mhm.
admittedly, I was skipping over that shit for a long time. Because why? Because, oh, I've gone down this path so many times. And now I've learned about trauma. So now I'm going into that realm of trying to like resolve my trauma and seeing what comes up for me and why, and going into the root cause of things. And all of that is well and beautiful.
Yeah.
But what happens when I go too far in that direction, and now I've lost touch with the basics of like, just being grateful for the opportunities that I am being given, and celebrating that a bit, so that I can actually feel like, okay, maybe all of these are exact examples to combat all of these negative thoughts that are going on
Totally.
in my head. But anyway, that's my personal experience that's going on with me right now. I'm sure that you have probably worked with so many people who experience things like that.
Yeah, yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
That's like, that's everyone. I always say, like, if you want to do shadow work, start your own business,
Yeah.
because nothing is gonna come up more than if you're, starting, especially like even if you're not starting from zero, right? Like it's still, you are the finance department, the marketing department, the sales department, and you're doing everything for the first time. Even if it's like year 2, year 3, there's still a lot of stuff where you're like building up and you're going up the mountain. And it's going to be a little while before you feel like maybe you get over the hump. And that's okay too. Like I'm okay with taking things a little more slow and normalizing that. A lot of businesses actually take like 2 or 3 years to really feel like more comfortable. And we see many overnight or under a year, like 0 to 6 figures in 60 days or whatever on the internet. And I'm like, that's great that they did that. But we know that there's a lot of people who do it slow and steady instead. And that's okay too. I just want to normalize that, because it's great that people are like celebrating their wins, but we can't take it as the standard, because then when we don't do this thing, in our first year of business, maybe people feel like a failure or a fraud. And it's like, well, no, just like homegirl just was saying that like she did this thing that like maybe, most people don't do. Or maybe people have, a previous, like you said, you worked in corporate for 10 years in Manhattan. Like not everybody I worked in the marketing world. So when people are like, wow, you're so good at Instagram, or like, wow, you're so good at like creating content, I'm like, I got paid for it and I did it every day for myself and my clients. Before that, I studied photography and video in school. And so I'm like, if you are learning this now and it's a learning curve and you get frustrated, know that like I'm good at it because I practiced it. And also I have years of experience like in my past. So, you know, it's not, some people aren't like playing on the same level field as you are, and they won't check their privilege and say like, oh, by the way, I also, my husband's also like a professional photographer and I've been, you know, an influencer for the last 15 years. Well, no wonder you like went from 0 to like 6K or whatever in a month. Like, so that's something I also have a bone to pick with a lot of people that I see online. I'm like, just check your privilege. I don't care if you get bankrolled for your first business. I don't care if you like have 15, 10, whatever years, or if, you know, you have some other privilege. That's fine. Just like, don't forget to tell that as part of your story, because that way people aren't like, well, why am I not doing it like her or like him or like them? Well, there's different life story there, and there's different skills and paths. So you can't compare your first step to like somebody's first step in their 10th year, right? It's not the same thing.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, like I almost get like a little protective of my clients when I'm like, don't you feel bad about yourself? Let me show you, let me show you what, like, you know, what's the reality of this. So there's that. And then there's actually building the business part, and then having to like really see yourself and come back and be your biggest cheerleader and have this radical trust and faith in yourself that you've never had before, like next level. And some days you wake up, you're like, oh, I feel like crap today. I don't want to cheer myself on today. And like, get a support system. I always tell people like, it doesn't have to be me. I love working with a coach. I had a business coach. She was wonderful. But I also love networking or calling a friend, you know, like whatever works for you as a support system, or maybe few different buckets of support. Set that up for yourself, because there's going to be days where you're like, I am over it. And then you know what to do. Like you lean on those people or that network or that group, or write in your journal or punch a pillow, whatever you need to do. But like, it's good to think of those things ahead of time so that when the hard thing comes, and it will, you know, you have a little bit of a plan or a system set up.
Completely. I mean, we've been talking a lot on this show about community. And you know, when I go down into even the concepts I'm learning lately, like polyvagal theory, for example, which is a lot about co-regulating and engaging with people, and the importance of being able to do that as a means of regulating your, like you said, when you wake up one day and it's just like not happening. You have self-regulation skills, which is self-care, right? And then the importance of community, of who you are surrounded with. So I love that you mentioned about networking. And again, if we go back to hustle culture for a second, you know, like historically, the concept of networking, we think about that, or like you think about those, you know, networking events that people have to, you know, in the industry and all that, right? Which is like all well and good. And I even have like a different outlook on those experiences at this point now. And I probably still am in communication with a bunch of people that I've met through those type of things. But the community that I have been able to build of specifically women in wellness, women in business, women entrepreneurs, and moms, and so on and so forth, just simply online. And believe me, I do have my moments where I fucking cannot stand social media. So I go back and forth. So if you're one of the people that has, you know, their moments too, but I do see the value, probably that's my number one thing, right? About social media in general. My number one pro, right? That I'll always remind myself is that it has given me the opportunity to meet some of the coolest, most amazing people. And my network of people that I get to co-regulate with, which is part of why I do this show, is to have this sort of connection and have this back and forth. It is so important. So if you're listening to this, we're not necessarily talking about like, this networking event that you go to and you put your blazer on and you go and all the things. It's literally about like build your community, decide, discern who are the people that are lifting you up and who are the people that are like toxic in a way, that are shutting you down, making you feel less than, and who are you following? Because to your point, there are a lot of people. If you are going through your feed as specifically as an entrepreneur, if you are going through your feed and you get a feeling about something, or you find yourself, and I do it, trust me, and I'm continuing to unfollow people. I'm still in the process of trying to do that, where I am discerning. I am drumming down what I'm exposed to, because there are plenty of people with the quantum leap your business and 6-figure this and that. And again, wonderful. Like, do it. If and only if, and here's my biggest thing, if your nervous system is ready to do it. Because it's really the same thing as what we started talking about in the beginning about feeling physical symptoms from pushing ourselves further than what we're ready to be doing in that moment. I mean, I can tell you now that I don't think I actually realized that I suffer from anxiety until I left the corporate arena, because again,
feel your body again,
right? It was like I was thriving on it in a way, right? It was actually helping me to succeed in a way, because
adrenaline.
You know what I mean? Like, there's so much fear and drive to do more and better. But leaving that and going into motherhood, that right away, like going into entrepreneurship, like that comes up right away. Like, holy shit, why am I, first things first, right? Why am I comparing myself to all of these people? I didn't know I was a person that did that. Like, I do that? No, I didn't have to really focus on it in that way, because when you're an entrepreneur, or I'm sorry, I should say, when you are working for a big corporation, for example, you're not necessarily, I mean, yeah, you're definitely up against other people for certain roles and everything. But when you're a one-man show, you become an entrepreneur and you're a one-man show. That's it. Like, this is me. This is my brand. That's you. That's your brand, and so on and so forth. It is very easy to get caught up in that loop. And I still do it. And I then question myself, like, I didn't know I was a person that does that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, people get like spotlight syndrome. I just made that up. But but when people are like, oh, I am nervous, or I feel really dysregulated by thinking that I have to be so public. And I'm like, okay, so what if you start a Facebook group that's private and you have to vet everybody that joins? How would that make you feel? Would that make your nervous system a little happier as a beginning entrepreneur versus just doing all of the things, like jumping on Instagram and publicly posting a reel every day? And then, like, what if you just wrote a newsletter and it was mostly text, so you didn't have to show up on video, because people get like really like scared. It's like, I think maybe a form of stage fright, or scared, dysregulated. They feel a lot of like resistance and anxiety. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's find other solutions. Like, what about a text-based newsletter and maybe a picture or a funny GIF that's not even you, and then a private Facebook group? How does that feel? And I've run that by people and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that seems like a good first step. And I'm like, okay, see, you can do it with your capacity at the center. Like, you can start there.
What's comfortable for you?
Exactly. Because I don't want my clients to feel dysregulated, because when you're dysregulated, your higher order thinking skills, this, like your prefrontal cortex goes offline. And you cannot make these big executive decisions because you're stuck in fight or flight, and you're there in fight or flight, and your body is trying to do what's like at the bottom of the totem pole, which is like regulate and make sure you're safe and you're not like in a threatening situation. And so you have to make so many executive higher order decisions as a business, or like as a business owner, or even as like a professional, or as a mother, right? Like, so it's good to first take care of that nervous system, so then you can set your brain and body up to start to make those harder decisions. And that's why I'm like always continuing to like educate myself in trauma. I've done like continue education. I started in 2018 and got a community, like trauma-informed community, like outreach certification with a nonprofit here in Florida. And then, thank you. And then, I have Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score right here in my library.
Mm-hmm.
Just always like come back to it because I felt that when I experienced like my fibromyalgia, that was like my nervous system like screaming at me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that it's really like that's really important. And there's solutions for like, keeping your nervous system happy and working at your capacity. I've had clients that are like, yeah, okay, cool. And I'm just like, okay, like, you want to go? Let's go. Like, and they're like, sure, like, hit me. We did like, Instagram strategy, TikTok strategy. This was like in 2 hours. My client was like, yep. She's already been posting on TikTok. She's like a go-getter. She's like really familiar with the topics that we've been talking about. She's had previous education, all of that. And then there's like clients that, I just finished working with a client where she has a tremendous story, and she's really been through it in a lot of ways. And so we like talked a lot about like, feeling motivators, like how does she want to feel in these different like life buckets, like work, health, interpersonal. And then we're like, okay, well, what's like one goal for the month or for the quarter that you can implement in a habit that can help you feel those things? Completely different, right? Like, and we worked about the same amount of time between client one and client two. So it really is like about me asking, like checking with my clients and seeing where they're at. And then like, okay, cool. Well, this is like, because if I were to throw 50 things at someone, they're like going to be like, and then they're going to be like, forget it. I don't even know where to start. I'm overwhelmed. So, yeah.
Everybody's brain also works very differently. Like I also, going back to, once again, congratulating you and even thanking you for putting a trauma-informed community first and making and prioritizing that, because here's where we're at. Like, we are in a new game in culture right now where we're starting to understand that everybody is responding to their experiences and not necessarily doing this consciously. Some of us are very conscious of it, but one of the, you even noted before about, having stage fright or being fearful of certain modes of marketing, especially on social media and so on and so forth. On one hand, everybody, again, everybody is comfortable with different things. Everybody's like mind works differently. So obviously the mode by which you're going to get your marketing done as an entrepreneur might be different. But you also have tons of coaches and advertisers and so on and so forth out there who are screaming at you that you need to go live. You need to put out video. You will not be success. This is success. Like telling us and just bringing it to more of a general sense, right?
Yeah.
Whatever in our current culture is telling you what success looks like. But we always have to not only find a mode of self-care to come back to conscious living first, and then from conscious living, decide for you what is going to feel right for you to be your mode of marketing or to be your way that you want to tell your story or how you want to be portrayed versus just like showing up like this person did. And then to bring it back to like having a more trauma-informed approach, like when you show up authentically by way of that as an entrepreneur or by doing it that way, that is a more trauma-informed approach. So what we're talking about for the people who are like, well, what the fuck what is that? But just drumming it back for a second, trauma-informed meaning taking into account the fact that we are all recovering and healing from some shit. Yeah. In a nutshell, right? Which means that if I show up authentically, as I am attempting to do in this moment with a little bit of mascara on and nothing else, and relatively poor lighting. Um, if I'm showing up authentically and showing you my actual life versus showing up every fucking time in full makeup with the filter also and the perfect lighting and my husband's a photographer or what, you know, or whatever it is, right? And showing you fully a highlight reel of my life as opposed to actually showing you what life really looks like for me and the good, the bad, the ugly, right?
Yeah.
By doing that and by getting okay with yourself to be able to do that, you are actually contributing to a more trauma informed world because you are making it okay to be you and you're making it okay for someone else to be them, the real them. And I have to be honest with you, you know, and I know you're going to agree with me based on your content. You know, I have a real problem, especially in the coaching industry. I have a real problem with people showing up in that fully filtered, 100% manufactured and very calculated type of approach because, you know, you're sitting here trying to help people, you know, live the life that they envision, right? Like keeping it general, right? Like live their best life or really like really cultivate the life that they really always wanted versus just going through the motions and living unconsciously, right? Wonderful. Perfect. But how can we do that when we are bombarded with stuff not only that isn't really possible for everyone. So that's a big part of being trauma informed too, is really getting to the crux, like you said, of like what when you have privilege versus when you don't, and taking that into account. But how can we sit here and, you know, throw out only things that are filtered and perfectly manufactured and look wonderful and not also expect people on the other end to be triggered by this? Like, again, not that it is technically, just to clarify, not that it is technically my responsibility to manage when you're triggered, right? As a person, if you're triggered, it's your responsibility to check in with yourself. And that's when those, you know, shadows are coming out to and saying hello and asking to be dealt with and all
Yeah.
that good stuff.
Sit down, have a cup of tea.
Right. But I can't, you know, it's not very trauma informed to come at, hopefully if somebody's listening to this and has struggled with showing up online, right? Maybe it takes the edge off a little bit. I know for me, it feels a lot lighter in my body knowing that I have made the definitive decision to not worry about showing up with makeup every single time. I went, you know, I was on my, you know, stories this morning dancing around like a damn fool, um still mostly in my pajamas. Like I cannot, my nervous system does not do well with having the pressure of only being able to come online if I look perfect. I mean, I don't. Like there's not, you're going to see a lot less of me if I gotta go perfect myself every time. So once I let that go, that felt a lot better for me.
Yeah, I think I'm like with you now. Like nowadays, I don't have to like put on makeup and I can show up a little messy, right? And that's okay. And I think it's because I've like accepted more of like my messiness and myself. And I've also taught myself that like just because I don't show up perfectly, it doesn't mean that I'm any less. I would say probably it wasn't like that always. I think that I was like very performative and buttoned up and like perfect. And I like it was like a control thing and also like a well, I need to be this way in order for people to take me seriously. And I need to be this way in order for people to like buy from me and want to be like me and that's changed as a result of me just learning to accept myself more and know that I know enough and people want the whole package and like I don't need I'm already enough. I already know enough. I already like can help people enough and that doesn't change because I have on gym clothes versus like professional, right, clothes and quotes. So I think that now I'm more okay with like just like putting it out there. And I think that one of the things that helped me like heal that wound was ironically social media because I was creating so much damn content. I was like, I don't have time to do the full face of makeup. I need to get this information out there. People want to hear it. I think it can really help people, and it can call in those clients and like create this magnetic connection. And you know what? I'm exhausted and I don't have time to put on, freaking makeup right now. And it became a practice of that and being like, well, what if I don't show up today with makeup? Is that going to change anything? And then getting that affirmation that like it didn't. And that actually people were like more like amped up by me just like showing up a little like messy and imperfectly. That was like, oh, I can just be more of myself. So it's been a process of, again, like unlearning that. And like, I used to be such a perfectionist. And so I have some, like, I think I have some empathy for people that like I always question, when you see those like girl boss gatekeeping kind of like people on the internet that are like, you know, go, go, go. And like, they have these like little quips about like mindset that's like, that wasn't nuanced at all. I don't know. Like, it would be nice if that was like, well, you just need to believe in yourself. Like, okay, well, what if you like grew up in poverty? Believing in yourself doesn't like pay your bills. Sorry. But, like when I see those people, sometimes I'm like, well, I think most people are doing it in good faith and they just like maybe haven't stumbled across that information that was like, oh, I don't need to be this performative and this buttoned up and this like, like I'm presenting. So, I mean, I don't know, but I always think about like maybe they're being performative because they feel like they have to, and that's their zone of comfort. And then two, I think like maybe they haven't had the experiences that I have about like trying to reduce harm, because we're all going to like eventually maybe put our foot in our mouths, and like that's okay. I think it's just a process of like trying to reduce harm and trying not to trigger people and trying to like have this approach where you're like, everyone's different, people are nuanced and complicated, and I'm just going to try to move forward in business to reduce like all of that so that people can just be as successful and like as fulfilled and abundant as possible. And that's what I try to do. But yeah.
Completely.
And if anyone makes you feel like shit, unfollow them immediately. I always tell people, you don't have enough time. You're trying to grow a business. You don't have time for that.
Nope. Ain't nobody got time for that. I agree 100%. It's one of those things like, ruminating is a tricky thing, right? If you find yourself ruminating, meaning overthinking or, second guessing yourself and all of that stuff, right then and there, that is a moment where you can offer yourself care. You can offer yourself some introspection and say, just get a pen and paper out and start journaling, start writing down, what you're feeling, where you think it might be coming from, what specifically triggered this, potentially where you feel it in your body. There's a lot to be gained. And I guess this is my like bringing it on home part of the conversation, like back to self-care, right? There's a lot to be gained in being super conscious and intentional about your business and about the things that are affecting you in your business and the things that are going great and the things that are going not so great. And I think the part of the problem is what we were taught, coming back again to what we mentioned earlier, what we were taught success is. So a lot of the time we're just trying to get to the end. We have a vision. We're trying to get there as fast as possible, or we're trying to grow the income as fast as possible, and whatever it is. But there's so much to be gained by slowing down and actually being a little bit more conscious about what's coming up in the process, because healing isn't linear. That shit is going to come up no matter what. You're not skipping over the step. You're not skipping over it. It will come up for you. So, just allowing yourself some space to actually unpack some of it. And again, this goes not only for people who are starting a business or in earlier stages or in not so early stages, but it's for people who are life is transitioning. Life is changing for you right now. Many of us are in that state, regardless of what the hell is even going on in your career or your personal life, because we're coming whatever, wherever we're at in this pandemic situation, I have no idea. I don't want to say we're coming out of it. Who fucking knows? But you know, people, the world is we're coming back to life a little bit, right? The people are coming out again.
Well, in Florida here, people have been out for a while, but
I know, yeah, where you are, you know, for me, I'm over here like, yay, I have full yoga classes for the first time in 2 years, right?
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so we're all in a bit of a we're going to be probably, you know, in the midst of a transition period. And I
yeah,
think a lot of us have realized through this pandemic situation that yes, it's a perfect example. When life gets shaky because of any type of transition, those shadows will appear. And you're, as much as we are taught, again, I've said it a million times on this show, you know, much as we are taught that success looks a certain way, we're taught that self-care looks a certain way, whether that be you know, pedicures and bubble baths, that women are taught, you know, to care for themselves by way of those things, right?
yeah,
um or whatever it might have been that you've absorbed as self-care. Your self-care through a life transition might very well just be actually addressing the elephant in the room that keeps coming up over and over again. If you find yourself, like we said, you know, second guessing yourself, um, feeling that visceral fear and anxiety come up when you are about to do a video or you're about to get on the phone with a potential client or whatever it is, like actually allowing yourself some space and time to sit with that. And as much as we're carrying on a lot about how hard this process is and how much shit comes up, I would not, and I'm just going to, this is the last thing I'm going to say about it. Like, I wouldn't trade this experience for anything. Why? Because this is the way I want to live life. I
yeah,
don't want to live life um, unconsciously. I don't want to live life just in constant reaction to like external matters. I want to live life where I know exactly the root cause of a lot of things that are going on for me. I want to live life in awareness. And I also want to 100% chip away at as much of whatever it might be, as much trauma that is blocking me as I possibly can in this lifetime. Do I see myself coming out the other end some sage or some like 100%, you know, evolved and enlightened person who now has zero trauma?
yeah,
No, not in this lifetime, at least. I'm sure that's not going to be the case, but I choose to be on the path that is in that trajectory. I choose to live consciously. And you know, being on my own in this career space allows me not only the opportunity to be creative and intuitively like come just do things my way. So that's like one way of one benefit of being in this space, right? But also, yeah, sure, it's a benefit in my opinion that it's showing me exactly what I need to work on every single time.
yeah. I think that, I mean, like a lot of things, like healthy habits, I am obsessed with James Clear, and the science behind habits. And I think that self care and, you know, whatever that whole world is, besides like pampering and bubble baths and manicures and stuff, like that's a practice. And it's not like people love going to the gym like really hard for like a week, but like tell them to, you know, change their lifestyle and go like once a week maybe for the next 3 months. And that's more challenging for, I think, for me, for many people, because that consistency
Mhm.
is tougher than just going balls to the wall for a short period of time. Like that for me, when I like, you know, think about what's easier, like yeah, going balls to the wall for a short period of time, and then you're like, ah, it's over. But healing is like that too. It's not like, oh, I'm healed now. Like
Mm.
stuff will come up forever, and it's just a matter of like arming yourself with tools that you can rely on, um, to get you through those periods where like you have an oh shit moment. And I think about the quote, like wherever you go, there you are. And I think that I'm still learning that, and really trusting myself, getting my body back, trusting myself, like, like learning about the systemic problems and inequalities that I've had to face. I'm an immigrant. I moved to the US when I was like 2 years old. We fled like terrorism in Peru, and I've had, my parents struggled. They did the immigrant thing. My dad still doesn't speak English. He's tried, but yeah, I mean, I really like saw, like, thinking back to my childhood, and I had a really happy childhood and my parents are like my heroes, but like it's hard to, as an adult now, like think about all of the systemic things that they were up against, and they overcame it. They put 3 kids through college. They did the American dream thing. But to be like, wow, they didn't have to, but the systems are so messed up that there's like, they struggled more because of it. And it's hard to look back at your life as an adult and as like an immigrant, like Latina woman, and be like, okay, well, like, it's heartbreaking to think back and to be like, I wish I could protect my parents more. And so like, of course my brain goes to like, well, I just need to work really hard and then I can like, buy them a house or something. And like, it's having to unravel that, like that yarn. Everybody has their own like mess of their life, and having to like really like pull the strings and make sense of it and align, right? I heard you say that word earlier, is like align and do it in a way that makes sense. And doing this work while you like build a business or like go through your professional life or whatever, like, yeah, building a business that honors like your capacity takes longer typically. But so that's why I do like 6-month, like one-on-one mentorships too. Like I started offering it this year because I'm like, 6 weeks isn't enough. 6 months. I've been working with someone for a year now. She just sold out her yoga retreat. She just got offered to lead a yoga teacher training. That's like her curriculum. And it's like she will lead it. She has only got 2 spots left on that. And I'm like, yeah, it just takes time. It just takes time to go slow, steady, but if that's how you want to be, because that's like where you work, how you work your best, at that speed, then just know that things might take longer for you. And that's not wrong. It's just it just is. Nothing's wrong or right. It just is. And, if someone wants radical transformation in 6 weeks, I will talk to them and then just be honest with them. Like, if you go really slow, we can go slow. But for longer, that would be best for you. Of course, like, there's a lot of other factors, but I always try to like, give people the right expectations and the right information about what to expect about building a business, because it's building those little blocks over like, and then experimentation, trying, licking your wounds when something doesn't work. I just did a group program. It was my 3rd time launching a group program. The first 2 failed. 1, crickets, the first one. Womp womp. Second time, I actually like gave money back to people because it just didn't feel right. And I turned it into a course. The course sold. 3rd time, I was like shaking in my boots. I was like, here we go again. And then I bought, people bought, and I had a really good time. And some people signed up to work one-on-one with me. So it was like, you have to experiment and you have to be like, I'm going to do it. Let's see how we can change it. Let's see how we can tweak it. Cry to my husband out. Oh, this thing didn't work. I'm horrible. I'm a horrible coach. And then realize that, no, I'm not. It just like maybe wasn't the right thing at the right time for the right people. So it's like, it's all of those things. It really is like a whole exciting, crazy roller coaster world. And, you're how you live, not what you can produce, like, period. So
completely. I mean, and that reminds me, when you were talking about, what your answer might be. First of all, thank you for sharing all of that, not only the background with your parents, but also the fact that, yes, like very specifically, there are going to be failures, and then you learn from them and you grow as you grow as you go. We don't learn anything if we just stay still and we don't do anything. If we never take a leap, right? I'm in that space right now where I have, I've definitely, I've had a couple group programs. Nothing that has blown my socks off, but definitely successes in individual, like knowing that I'm making impact. I know that I'm successful in that way, right?
Yes.
So then, what do I end up with though as time continues and new opportunities present themselves, which is happening for me right now. Wonderful, right? Like I have new platforms to be able to offer in person events and so on and so forth. And I have all these ideas, notebooks full of ideas, right? All over the place, a bit disorganized, but there.
Yeah.
All of this, right? So now the opportunity's there, the venue's there, the platform's there, all of it's in place. But, since we're sharing like what comes up specifically, I am as of lately having quite a intense trauma response to the fact that the movement is happening, right? So that's another thing that will happen. I read this
Mhm.
amazing book by, I think his name is Gary Chapman. It's a book called The Big Leap, and he talks about a lot about what he calls upper limiting himself. And it's not a trauma informed book by any means. Not
Yeah.
that it's hurtful, like or hurting
Right.
in any way. It's just not referring to any of this of what's really going on internally.
Yeah.
But upper limiting meaning self-sabotage, but now we know more on a scientific level what that actually is. I mean, that is a trauma response. That is your body literally reliving something that made you feel like this is going to end poorly. This is not safe. So what's happening for me is I'm having a response to the opportunity by feeling a resistance to pull back and a fear of, again, from previous experiences of like, what if no one shows up? Or
Yeah.
what if this proves my biggest fear that I am not enough?
Yes.
And all of that going forward, right? Like, and so on and so forth. So really being cognizant of when, and this, you had already said this as well, of being able to live consciously, being able to slow down enough to ask yourself, is this true? And is this mine? And
Mm.
that's another thing that's been coming up for me too, because like think I even said it a couple times in this conversation. I didn't know that I was the person who responded this way. I always thought that I had like so much confidence because I'm thinking about my past and in the corporate arena and stuff like that, where things were so much more structured and
Yeah.
organized, and you had, to be quite frank, less pressure, even though in some arenas, in some areas, it feels like more pressure. But when
Understand.
you're on your own, it's a whole different story. Like you
Yeah.
said, it's a one person show.
Yeah.
Everything falls on you. So when we're in that space, it's very, very different. And you have to be your own cheerleader. Like you said, you have to pull yourself out of that space. And we can't really do that unless we slow down enough to become aware when those reactions are coming into play. That's where I'm at. So I appreciate you talking about, very candidly about what what can happen, and the fact that you're still learning from things that you view as a failure, but in fact it's just a growing experience, having a
Mhm.
growth mindset, being like, I don't identify with this thing being a flop that I put out. I don't identify that. Like I am the person who put out the flop. Like that's not
Exactly.
useful in any way and will get you nowhere. But viewing it as, okay, like I put this out there, it flopped, and I can sit here and probably very easily come up with 3 reasons why. Cause like I birthed it. So I can tell, I can look at this and say to myself, and even if it is something that I'm willing to look at myself on, like one of the reasons I didn't promote it enough, for example.
Right.
Because why? Because I was too scared to get on and talk about it.
I was too
So,
scared
just
I
as
was
an
gonna bother
example, right? I
people.
was too scared to get on and talk. I probably could have promoted this more. I was too scared to show up online and talk about it, whether that's video or other, doesn't matter. And so that leads you to something that you will learn about yourself that you can elicit support to work on. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, the last piece I'll say. I know I said that already. The last piece I'll say is that you don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
There is no badge of honor for doing this work alone. That's why coaches exist. That's why we're here, because this is co-regulation and co-creation in process. We are not supposed to be doing this in silos. Why the network, the community is so important that you're in.
Yeah. We're a communal species. Like humans are meant to live in community and support each other. And just because we've evolved to like do online business on Instagram, that doesn't take away from like human nature. And if therapists have therapists and coaches have coaches, there's something there. So
Completely.
I'm all about like getting that support when I need it. And yeah, I mean, the second launch that I had that was like a failure, I was like, this doesn't mean that I'm a bad coach, and it doesn't mean that I'm a failure or that I'm bad at what I do. It just means that this thing didn't work right now. And I had a call with a coach, and we strategized together, and we were like, well, how about this turns into this offer, and then my coaching offer will be more about like business or branding versus like just Instagram. That's like, it was very like social media based. And that was like the kind of solution that we came up with. And we were like, this makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I mean, then I launched the Instagram course, it sold. I launched the business course, it sold, or the business program where it was like me showing up live. Yeah, I mean, that's that. And that's early business stuff too. It's like, well, the next time I go to relaunch the course, I already have it. And the next time I go to relaunch the program, I already have it. Like kind of a rinse and repeat thing, the second time around, which is so nice. It's like the second time you do that launch for that exact same thing, oh, it's so much easier. You already have all this stuff. Doesn't mean that it's like you're like chilling on the beach for the whole week, but it's easier. And, it gets
Because your nervous system has integrated, and not just like having the pieces, right? But you have to admit, like your nervous system has integrated what it ideally, if you've given it some time and you're giving yourself the space to do so, your nervous system has integrated what you learned from that first experience. So
totally.
it feels safer.
Yeah.
And I think that's all we're all striving for, is just feeling a sense of security and acceptance and enoughness, really.
Yeah.
So we get out of our own way enough to let things happen, let us get there, but not skipping steps. Really, we just can't.
I know. And that's okay. And I think also like, I've read, if people grew up in like a chaotic environment, when things aren't chaotic, that's their bodies telling them this isn't safe. So it's like, it's almost backwards, but that's like how the body just works, And when some people like, people talk a lot about like being scared of success. And like, I think that's what it actually is like your body and brain saying like, I'm not used to this. I'm used to the struggle, or I'm used to like, things being a certain way. This seems like it's going to be another way. I'd rather go back to the first way. It's just how the body like works, because it's trying to keep you safe. And then I think a lot of people, like I say, like flatten it out to be like, well, you're just scared of success. And it's like, yes. And the answer is usually yes. And there's more going on. So you can't be like, just mindset your way through it. Like, no, take care of your nervous system and mindset and whatever else like is in your toolbox that you get to learn to integrate into your life, that you get to discover because you're worth it. You're worthy of it just because you exist as a human. You don't need to do anything to be worthy of it. You were born. That's enough. That's it.
Yeah. That is so perfect. Thank you for saying that. 100%. We all have a birthright to success. It's not earned. We're not always taught that, but it's true. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. It's so important to talk about these things because, like I said, we're all in some form of a life transition at this point, whether it happened a year ago, whether it's happening right now. It's been an interesting few years.
Yes.
But of course, being an entrepreneur, yes, 100%. I'm willing to bet that there are tons of people listening to the, hopefully there are tons of people listening to this,
I hope
but there are
so.
tons of people out there who really do want to start a business and have an amazing idea, especially women, because what do we do? Women, we are creators. We are creatives. We are intuitives. We are creators. We birth things, including ideas. Doesn't have to be
Mhm.
kids.
Exactly.
We really are. We are creators. And it's a feminine gift. It absolutely is. So it always pains me a bit when I know that there's a lot of blockages to women coming into their full power to be able to take the action and do it confidently. So I appreciate that there are people like you that are helping that happen, because it's huge. We just need more female voices and faces out there in the business, in the entrepreneurial space, which is happening, and it makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, yeah, just thank you for having this conversation. Let us know where we can find you online in case whoever's listening wants to reach out and connect with you.
Yeah. So I recently just had a big rebrand. I
I
was
noticed.
Yeah, thank you. So I worked, and it was, speaking of support, it was so nice to not have to do this rebrand by myself. I couldn't have anyway. So I hired an amazing team. And so Shaky Yogi LLC is now Astra Business Coaching. You can find me on Instagram at Astra Biz Coaching and on TikTok. You can look me up on YouTube, or, just go right now. I'm going to be switching my homepage to, doing all of that background work by the end of April. So right now it's shakyyogi.com, but it will be astrabusinesscoaching.com. And sign up for my newsletter and just say hi. I'm happy to just say hey, have a conversation with people. Instagram is probably the easiest way to reach me.
Perfect. Yes, definitely follow Astra Biz Coaching. Follow Fi over there on Instagram. Obviously, it should be no shock that that's where I found her.
Yeah.
And your content is wonderful. Like we said, just very authentic, very real. It's very clear that you have a wonderful handle on that marketing aspect, but doing it from a very genuine, real place. And for the reasons we already stated, I just very much appreciate that approach. So beautiful. Thank you again for having this conversation with me and coming on the show. Again, you're listening to Self-Care is My Job. We're over on Facebook. There's a Facebook page, Self-Care is My Job. There's a YouTube page. So if you're listening or watching and you want to go ahead and go over to YouTube and subscribe to the channel, please do that. If you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, on Apple, on Google, on your whatever platform, if you're willing to rate, review, do the thing, share with your friends so that as many people that need to hear this message, it gets to their ears or their eyes, would be really helpful. Thank you again, Fi. I hope we can keep in contact, and thanks for everybody listening.
Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate it.